5 days ago, I thought I seen a small boy in the forest behind my land. He looked far too young to be out there all alone. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. And I know none of my neighbors have any young children, so I called out to him, asking if he was lost. He immediately took off running deeper into the forest. My first instinct was to chase after him. It wasn't safe for a child so young to be in the woods alone. And if he was lost, I needed to help him find his parents, but I hesitated. A deep, sickening fear rose up in the pit of my stomach, and I realized I hadn't been more than 20 or 30 feet into the forest. I felt that for some reason unknown, I must not go after the boy, and that some unidentifiable, awful thing lay behind the trees, just beyond my sight. But as I watched the boy disappear into the thickness of the woods, I brushed aside my seemingly irrational fear, and thought that if there was something out there, then all the more important I go after him. I ran into the forest. I seen him between the trees running. I called to him again, asking if he was lost, telling him I'll help him find his parents. He looked back at me for a moment, but then began to run even faster. I must have followed him for over a mile through the woods before I lost sight of him. I called out to him several times over the next few minutes before I was struck with that nauseous fear in the pit of my stomach again. I realized I was lost. I checked my pockets for my phone, and as I failed to find it, I remembered I hadn't used it all day, and must have never picked it up. Now, along with this fear, I had the deepest sense of regret I'd ever felt. I didn't understand how a child so young could be so fast. The faster I ran, the further away he seemed to get, and now I was lost in the woods alone with this overwhelming fear of something I couldn't place. I wandered lost for what seemed like hours, looking for any sign of the boy or a way out of this foreboding woodland. As I wandered, I began to notice the odd nature of the forest around me. The bark of the trees was a dark gray color. There was strange growths and lumps all over their twisted, sinister-looking limbs, and around the lumps an awful crimson mold leaked through cracks in the bark. The same deep red fungus was sprinkled across the forest floor. I started to notice dead birds here and there on the ground. The fear that welled up within me was now compounded by the strangeness of the environment and the presence and odor of death. The overwhelming sense of dread screamed at me to run for my life as the impression I was being chased by something unknown overcame me. I ran as fast as I could, darting between the trees. I realized I had no idea why I thought I was being chased, and I began to slow down. Then to my right, I seen him. The boy was standing there, looking into the distance and pointing. I stopped running and turned to look at what he was pointing at. I seen nothing. Then I felt his small hand grip mine. This startled me, and as I looked down at my hand, I was struck from behind by an immense weight, pushing me down and pinning me to the ground. I must have lost consciousness for a while. When I came to, the sun was going down. I tried to get up. A sharp pain shot through my back as I realized something heavy was on top of me. Looking over my shoulder, I seen a tree had fallen on me, and a branch stabbed me in the back. I couldn't feel my legs, and my back was in so much pain I thought that it must have been broken. The boy was gone. I was alone, wounded and helpless, in these woods that filled me with a sickening fear of what waits behind the trees, staring at me. And now the sun was setting, and soon darkness and shadows would descend from the sky and envelop everything in a shroud of awful black uncertainty. I regretted now more than ever having not picked up my phone before going outside, and despite my concern for the child, I wished I'd never seen him at all. Once darkness fully consumed all I could see and the light of the sun was no more, I heard some kind of movement, occasionally accompanied by a slow breathing and cracking sound. The sound moved around me for hours under the cover of darkness and shadow. My mind raced in terror, imagining what might lurk beyond my sight. I thought of wolves, bears, and all sorts of dangerous animals. I thought that it might be a person who may harm or kill me. Despite the fearful things I imagined, I could have never fathomed the horror I came to know was responsible for the haunting sounds. At some point in the late hours of the night, I was overcome by a strong fatigue, fearing the exhaustion was the result of internal blood loss. And being afraid of whatever the source of the sound was, I fought as hard as I could to retain consciousness. I lost my struggle to stay awake, but I awoke to the warmth of the sun shining down on me from high in the noon sky, where I could see it above the trees, shining its radiance through the strange, dark green leaves. I pulled myself out of the grogginess of my newly awakened state, and noticed the area around me didn't look like it did the day before. I assumed this was due to having only seen my surroundings as the sun was setting, but I thought surely this couldn't be where I was. I looked around, searching for familiarity, and then I seen it, in the distance between the trees. A figure, behind the tall undergrowth. The strange erratic movement of the odd shape caught my eye. I couldn't get a good look at it through all the plant life. At first, I thought it might be a man or a bear. I hoped it was someone who could help. But if this was someone or something that may try to kill me, I thought I should stay quiet till I could see it better. The more I stared at the thing, the more the bizarre movement began to make me think that whatever it wasn't anything I'd ever seen or heard of before. I froze in fear as the realization fell into my mind. It was too late. The thing was stalking me. It was there before I woke up, watching me from a distance, waiting for what it would judge a good time to strike. I was pinned down, weak and hurt, and now some strange beast posed the looming threat of my destruction. This strange thing was likely what was making noise around me in the darkness the night before. All day I watched it. It didn't come any closer. It just stood in place doing whatever it was doing that made it move like that. After several hours I began to wonder, was this horror merely some unknown beast, or was it an awful fleshy specter of death, or a demon sent to carry away my spirit on my last breath? As the sun started to go down, I thought I'd seen the boy again. He kept moving from tree to tree, hiding from me behind them. He'd wait till I'd look away, and then bolt from one tree to another. I say I think I seen him, because I didn't ever directly look at him. At the time, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. This unnerved me just as much as the awful thing standing in the distance. Now the sun was going down again, and I fully dreaded the oppressive darkness of the forest floor that would soon swallow me and all I could see. I became so nervous that I became sick and threw up small amounts of stomach fluid from my already empty stomach. After throwing up, the feeling of hunger overcame me. I hadn't noticed my hunger over the fear of the thing and the pain of my wounds, but at that moment, having not eaten since the day before, hunger hit me hard, and with the hunger came exhaustion. The stress of the fearful day had taken a lot out of me, and now the hunger drained me of what little energy I had in my already weakened and wounded state. As my weary thoughts became delirious and disjointed, odd and terrible ideas entered my mind. For a moment, just before passing out, I remember considering eating the fingers on my left hand. Luckily, I fell asleep before giving in to the temptation. I woke up late in the night, in a haze. I couldn't move at all. My body felt stiff and heavy. At first my vision was blurry, but I could make out figures illuminated by the light of candles and small fires arranged in a particular seeming configuration. The aroma of some kind of odd incense overpowered my sense of smell and repulsed me with its sweetness, mixed with the subtle hints of something foul and unidentifiable. Once my sight began to clear, I seen the figures were cloaked in black hooded robes, with strange red rune-like symbols sewn into the sleeves and torso. One of them, wearing an occultic talisman, was a bizarre crystal that seemed to shimmer with an indescribable color in the dim flickering light, approached me. Once the hooded figure came close enough, I could see a face under the hood. It was a strangely pale woman. Despite her silvery hair, she didn't appear to be old. She lifted her right hand, revealing she held a knife, some kind of ritual dagger, with more rune-like symbols etched on the blade. She reached forward, pushing the point of the blade into the flesh of my forehead. I struggled to move as she carved and cut, but couldn't. Blood ran down my face, dripping to the ground. The pain of her slow, ritualistic carving was unbearable. When she finished cutting my face, she grabbed my left wrist and quickly cut across my open palm. The sharp pain was nothing compared to the slow, precise cutting of my forehead. Blood quickly began to pour from the cut and dripped into a wooden bowl with what looked like human teeth lining the rim. The bowl rested on a black cloth on the ground. After holding my hand in place to collect the blood for a few moments, she picked up the bowl, released my wrist, stood up, and stepped away. I can't say for sure what happened next. I really don't remember. I thought I'd seen something behind her as she stepped away, but from there I can't recall till the next day. It's like I fainted or blacked out. I think it must have been the first time I'd seen the abomination up close. It must have shocked me so badly my mind blocked out the memory of it and the rest of the night. I awoke to a truly sickening horror the next morning. As I gained consciousness, the smell of rotting, putrid meat pulled me fully awake. I then became aware my head was propped up comfortably on something softer than the ground. Quickly realizing the surface of the object was covered in fur, I pushed myself away from it in disgust. It was the corpse of a black dog, with strips and chunks of flesh torn from it, near where my head had laid. All I can assume is that the disbelief was the only thing that stopped me from throwing up as the thought of what I must have done came to the front of my mind. But this horror was soon forgotten in light of something worse. I realized I had lifted myself a little off the ground. Surprised, I looked over my shoulder to see what had happened to the tree pinning me down. The tree was gone, and so were my legs. They looked as though they had been torn off or eaten away. This shocked me so much I began to lose my mind. Over the next few hours I screamed insanely as I crawled through the forest, throwing rocks and sticks in every direction. I harmed myself several times, punching and bashing trees with my fists and head. Eventually I became exhausted and lied still till I fell asleep again. What happened next, when I awoke, I can't say wasn't the fevered dream of a shocked and dying mind. It didn't seem like a dream, but the sheer fantastical strangeness of my surroundings and everything I seen makes it hard for me to believe it was real, even as it was happening. Despite knowing I was in fact awake, I found it all too hard to accept. I was laying in a few inches of water. It was dark and murky despite its shallowness. There was a thin veil of luminous mist covering the water's surface. From all around, a symphony of bizarre, otherworldly sounds echoed through the forest. The trees seemed to breathe, move, and be made of flesh. Their bony limbs reached toward the alien sky, ending in waving, thin, red feelers. Extending upward, they dripped with the same crimson slimy mold that I'd seen scattered about the forest floor and corrupting the trees. The wonder and splendor of the heavens was by far the greatest thing I'd ever seen. What few clouds floated overhead held a faint luminescence of purple, pink, and green. Their beauty was but an obstruction on my view of the celestial glory that was the sky above them. I seen what I think was 5 moons varying in size and color. 3 of these moons looked similar to the normal moon. Another glowed red like a heavenly ember, and yet another held colors and aspects of its appearance that I cannot describe. This same indescribability applies to most of what I seen then. I seen a great spiral galaxy looming in a quarter of the sky, and much more distant ones dotting the rest of the heavens, with the far closer stars that twinkled and shined in a rainbow of colors. It was a breathtaking vision of celestial spheres unknown. I was enraptured by the beauty and strangeness, but the contrasting strangeness of my immediate environment distracted me from my amazement at the sky and filled me with a deep panic. Nothing was familiar. I didn't know how I got there or how to get back, if I could get back. Was this another planet? Was I dreaming or hallucinating? It seemed so real, even more real than anything before or since that I've experienced in waking life. I heard a strange voice come from behind me in the distance. I spotted a large bonfire atop a mound between the tree-like things. A strange cloaked figure stood near the fire, shouting unintelligible things. It seemed to lift its hand and draw in the air, leaving behind blue glowing symbols that floated in place. I moved closer to get a better look, but I discovered the tree-like things weren't rooted in place. Several of them lifted up about a foot and moved away, clearing a path from me to the mound. I didn't wait to find out if the figure on the mound noticed or was even chasing me. I freaked out and crawled through the murky black water as fast as I could. I soon heard something moving fast through the water coming up behind me. I felt a sudden tightening around my waist, and I was back, just like that. I didn't really know where I was, but it looked like the forest I'd been lost and trapped in. The trees were normal, the sky and ground were normal. The sudden shift back to normal reality shocked me as much as it relieved me. And because of it and the strangeness of the whole experience, I can't really say if any of it was real or madness. I heard the sound of a car getting louder, and in the distance through the trees, I seen the light of the headlights pass by. Realizing I was near a road, I began to rush toward it the best I could. All I had to do was wait for the chance to get the attention of a passing car. I crafted a makeshift flag for my shirt tied to a stick to wave at approaching cars to make myself more noticeable. I propped myself up against a rock close to the side of the road and began to wait. Suddenly I heard a sickening crack behind me, and by reflex I turned and looked. And then there it was. The thing that haunted me, the thing that stalked me, what inspired such grotesque fear and panic, what lured me into the forest with what I can only assume was but the apparition of a lost child. Less than 10 feet away, there it was, standing on a single tree stump-like foot, its body a swollen mass of flesh, contorting and twisting grotesquely. Atop this awful thing were 3 gnawing, snapping jaws, filled with horrible rows of jagged teeth. The whole thing was wrong and surreal, like something that didn't belong to the nature of the earth. I was frozen in fear. All I could do was stare and behold the awful, contorting form of this horror. As it twisted, I could see its flesh stretching and tearing, exposing layers of tissue and malformed limbs that seemed to sink back into its body as quickly as they were exposed by its turning form. I was so mesmerized by the sight of the abomination that I didn't hear the sound of the car coming down the road. I didn't even notice the light of the headlights hitting against the trees. All I know is it just vanished as I heard the sound of the man's voice asking if I was okay. I couldn't bring myself to react at first, but as I heard him speak up a second time, I broke into a fit of shrieking and screaming. The man must have called an ambulance. I remember being put in the back of one. They must have given me a sedative to calm me down. I woke up in the hospital a few hours ago, late in the day. Upon awakening, I see I'm almost entirely bandaged up and feel sore all over. A nurse soon walked into the room. Seeming surprised to see me awake, she asked me how I felt and began to explain to me my wounds and the state I was found in. Most of my wounds I recall, but then she told me about how I have strange symbols that look like writing carved into my skin all over my arms and torso, and that they've bandaged me up like they have to prevent infection. Once I was alone, I began to look out the window next to my hospital bed. Seeing the sun beginning to set low in the sky, I realize the window faces west. There's a large field that goes on a long way, bordered on the far end by a tree line. Looking across the expanse, I fully realize I've made it. I'm safe. I'm alive, lying in a hospital bed, out of the woods. Tears of relief begin to stream from my eyes as I say to myself, it's over. I glance out the window once more, my eyes falling on the trees at the far end of the field. I hear the nurse walk in again and approach my bed. Seeing my frightened expression of dread and my frozen stare into the distance, she asks in a concerned tone, "What's wrong?" And I say to her, "It's there, where the sun sets on the horizon, the thing with the snapping jaws and twisting form. It stands there all day convulsing, waiting for the darkness of the cold night, like some horrible obelisk of churning, contorting flesh and teeth.